"Please don't call police," she begged, trembling in the rain, so the broke single dad hid her in his barn, never knowing the terrified girl he saved was the governor's missing daughter, and the people hunting her were already coming for him. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Through sheets of relentless rain, Noah Riggins worked methodically in his apple orchard, checking the drainage trenches he dug earlier that day. Lightning flashed across the darkened Georgia sky, illuminating rows of trees that stretched into the shadows. At 52, his joints protested the cold and damp, but he welcomed the distraction of physical labor. The steady drumbeat of rain on his worn canvas jacket matched the rhythm of his thoughts. 10 years had passed since Sarah's death, but on nights like this, the emptiness felt fresh as yesterday. She'd loved the orchard in all seasons, even in the raw chill of autumn storms. "Getting soft in your old age," he muttered to himself, adjusting the flashlight beam to check another drainage channel. The weather report had warned of flash flooding, and he couldn't risk losing any more trees. The orchard was all he had left now, besides Caleb. His son was away at college, thriving in his second year of engineering studies. Noah felt pride in that, even as his chest ached with loneliness. The house was too quiet without Caleb's music floating down the hallway or his midnight raids on the kitchen. The boy had his mother's gentle spirit and his father's determination, a combination that had helped them both survive after Sarah's passing. Thunder rolled overhead as Noah sloshed through puddles toward the equipment barn. The old structure's metal roof groaned in the wind, a sound that brought back memories of nights when Sarah would insist on bringing in the barn cats during storms. "God's creatures need shelter too," she'd always said. He paused to wipe rain from his face, his calloused hand rough against weathered skin. The years of working the orchard alone had left their mark, etching deep lines around his eyes and mouth. Local folks called him a recluse, but he preferred the term private. After Sarah died, the whispers and pitying looks had driven him further into solitude. The orchard became his sanctuary, the repetitive tasks of pruning and harvesting a form of meditation. Lightning split the sky again, closer this time. Noah counted 1, 2, 3 before the thunder crashed overhead. The storm was directly above now. He needed to check the new saplings he'd planted in the spring, make sure they weren't drowning in the deluge. As he turned toward the younger trees, a different sound caught his attention, something that didn't belong to the storm's symphony. A scraping, then a muffled thud from behind the barn. Noah swung his flashlight toward the noise, its beam cutting through the rainfall. Probably just another raccoon raiding the compost pile. But years of military service had taught him to investigate anything out of place. He approached cautiously, boots squelching in the mud. The light revealed scattered tools near the barn's corner. He'd have to remember to put those away before they rusted. Another sound, this time distinctly human, a sharp intake of breath. Noah's hand tightened on the flashlight. "Who's there?" His voice carried the authority of a man used to being obeyed, even as his heart rate picked up. He hadn't had uninvited visitors in years, and certainly not in the middle of a storm. No answer came, but he caught movement in his peripheral vision. Swinging the light to his left, he illuminated a huddled figure pressed against the barn's wooden slats. It was a young woman, perhaps early 20s, her dark hair plastered to her face by the rain. Her clothes, what looked like expensive running gear, were caked with mud and torn in places. She raised a trembling hand to shield, her eyes from the flashlight's glare, revealing bruises on her wrist. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Please, don't call the police." Noah lowered the flashlight slightly, but kept it trained in her direction. Her face was streaked with what might have been tears or just rain, and something in her eyes spoke of a bone-deep terror that made his protective instincts stir. He'd seen that look before, in war zones and disaster areas, the look of someone who'd run out of options and had nowhere left to turn. It was the same expression he'd worn himself in those first devastating days after Sarah's death, when he'd stood in their bedroom, staring at her empty closet, wondering how the world could keep turning when his had stopped completely. The young woman shivered violently, her arms wrapped around herself in a futile attempt to stay warm. Despite his natural caution and the alarm bells ringing in his mind, Noah couldn't ignore someone in obvious distress. Sarah would never have forgiven him for that. He shrugged off his canvas jacket, moving slowly to avoid startling her. "I'm going to come closer," he said, keeping his voice steady and calm, the way he used to talk to spooked horses in his father's stable. "You look half frozen." She pressed herself further against the barn wall, but didn't run. Noah stopped a few feet away and held out his jacket. I'm Noah Riggins. This is my orchard. Whatever trouble you're in, we can figure it out. But first, let's get you out of this rain." The young woman stared at him through the curtain of her wet hair, measuring him with eyes that held equal parts hope and fear. Lightning flashed again, and in that brief, brilliant moment, Noah saw something else in her face, a deep exhaustion that spoke of miles run and bridges burned. Through sheets of relentless rain, Noah approached the barn's weathered door, the beam of his flashlight catching movement behind the structure. His heart skipped a beat. Years of military training kicked in as he moved cautiously around the corner, ready for anything. Almost anything. What he found was a girl huddled against the barn wall, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. She couldn't have been more than 20. Mud caked her jeans and sweater, and her dark hair was plastered to her face by the rain. When his flashlight beam found her, she squinted and raised a trembling hand to shield her eyes. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Don't call the police." Noah lowered the flashlight, directing it at the ground instead. "You're soaked through," he said, keeping his voice steady and calm. "Let's get you inside where it's dry." She hesitated, studying him with wary eyes that reminded him of wounded animals he'd encountered in the orchard, desperate but dangerous in their fear. "I'm Noah Riggins. This is my orchard." He took a slow step back, giving her space. "The equipment barn's right here. Got a small office with heat." After a long moment, she nodded and struggled to her feet, wrapping her arms around herself. Noah noticed she favored her right leg as she limped forward. Inside the barn, Noah flicked on the lights and led her to his small office in the corner. It wasn't much, just a desk, a couple of chairs, and a small electric heater he used during winter pruning sessions. But it was dry and warm. He grabbed the emergency blanket he kept in his desk drawer and handed it to her. "Thank you," she murmured, wrapping it around her shoulders. Her teeth were chattering. "Got some spare clothes in the storage closet. My son's old work clothes from last summer might fit you." Noah kept his movements slow and predictable as he retrieved the clean jeans and flannel shirt. "Bathroom's through that door if you want to change." She accepted the clothes with shaking hands. "I'm Ellie," she offered quietly before disappearing into the bathroom. Noah busied himself making coffee on the small machine he kept in the office, deliberately not wondering about the bruises he'd glimpsed on her wrists or the fear in her eyes. Everyone had their reasons. He'd learned long ago that some questions were better left unasked. When she emerged wearing Caleb's old clothes, she looked younger than ever, swimming in the too big flannel. But some color had returned to her cheeks and she'd cleaned the mud from her face. "Coffee?" he offered, holding out a mug. "It's not great, but it's hot." She wrapped her hands around the mug gratefully. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said after a few sips, staring into the dark liquid. "I know you have no reason to trust me or help me, but got an old caretaker's cottage?" Noah interrupted gently. "Nobody's used it since Mr. Peterson retired 5 years ago. It's not much, but it's got a bed and running water." He paused, studying her face. "You can stay there tonight, at least until we figure something out." Relief flooded her. Features, followed quickly by suspicion. "Why would you help me?" Noah thought about Sarah, about the way she'd never turned away anyone in need, about Caleb, and how he'd want his son to behave in the same situation. "Because it's raining," he said simply, "and because everybody needs help sometimes." He drove them to his house first in his old pickup truck, the rain still drumming on the roof. In the kitchen, he heated up some leftover stew while Ellie sat at the table, her posture tense despite her obvious exhaustion. "It's not fancy," he said, setting a bowl in front of her along with some crusty bread. "But it's filling." She ate like someone who hadn't seen food in days, though she tried to hide it behind careful, measured bites. Noah pretended not to notice, busying himself with gathering some basic supplies, clean towels, extra blankets, a few cans of soup from the pantry. The caretaker's cottage sat at the far edge of the orchard, a small one-room structure with a tiny bathroom and kitchenette. Noah turned on the lights and the heat, checking that everything was in working order, while Ellie stood in the doorway, clutching the bag of supplies. "Bed's clean. Put fresh sheets on it last spring when I was using this as a storage room. There's hot water, but give the tap a minute to run clear first." He pointed out the basic features of the cottage, then headed for the door. "I'll bring some breakfast in the morning." "Mr. Riggins?" Her voice stopped him at the threshold. "Thank you. I know you probably think I don't think anything," he said quietly. "Get some rest, Ellie." He locked the cottage door from the outside, not to keep her in, but to keep others out. As he walked back to his truck, the rain finally began to ease, and a sliver of moon peeked through the clouds. Noah glanced back at the cottage, its windows now glowing warmly in the darkness. Sarah would have approved, he thought. Sometimes, that was all a man needed to know he'd done right. Morning sunlight filtered through the apple trees, casting dappled shadows across the weathered path leading to the caretaker's cottage. Noah carried a paper bag filled with basic supplies, toiletries, a clean towel, and some of his late wife's old clothes that had been boxed away in the attic. The gravel crunched beneath his work boots as he approached the small building. He knocked firmly on the door. "Miss, it's Noah Riggins." "Just a minute," came the muffled response. When the door opened, Noah was surprised to find the cottage's main room already tidied. The girl, Ellie, she'd called herself, had swept the floors and wiped down the surfaces. She'd even arranged the threadbare furniture to make the space feel more welcoming. "I hope you don't mind," she said softly, gesturing at the room. "I wanted to make myself useful." Her clothes from last night were still mud-stained, but she'd managed to clean her face and hands. In the morning light, Noah could see. She was younger than he'd first thought, probably no older than his son. "Brought you some things," he said, holding out the bag. "Nothing fancy, but it'll help." Ellie's eyes welled with tears as she accepted it. "Thank you, Mr. Riggins. I don't know how to repay your kindness." Noah shifted uncomfortably. "Just stay out of trouble. My son will be home from school soon. He doesn't need to know everything. But I understand," she said quickly. "I can be just another traveler who needed help, nothing more." The sound of tires on gravel interrupted their conversation. Noah glanced out the window to see his son's beaten-up Chevy truck pulling up to the main house. "That's Caleb now," Noah said. "I should go meet him. You're welcome to join us for dinner later if you'd like." Back at the house, Caleb was already inside, dropping his backpack by the door. "Dad, your truck's still here. Everything okay?" Noah took a deep breath. "We have a visitor staying in the cottage for a few days. Young woman named Ellie. Found her caught in the storm last night." Caleb's eyebrows shot up. "In the cottage? Dad, we haven't let anyone stay there since." "I know," Noah cut him off. "But sometimes helping others means stepping outside our comfort zone." Just then, a knock at the back door made them both turn. Ellie stood there, now wearing one of the clean blouses from the bag. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said. "I just wanted to introduce myself properly." Caleb's friendly nature immediately took over. "Hey there, I'm Caleb," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome to Riggins Orchard." Though I guess Dad already covered that part. Ellie shook his hand, offering a small smile. "Thank you. I'm just passing through, trying to make my way up north. My car broke down a few towns back, and I've been catching rides where I can." "That's rough," Caleb said sympathetically. "Hey, Dad, maybe we could help her find work in town? Mrs. Henderson at the diner's always hiring." Noah watched the exchange carefully. Ellie's story sounded rehearsed, but he recognized the genuine fear behind her eyes. Whatever she was running from, it was serious enough to make her spin careful lies. "One day at a time," Noah said firmly. "For now, Ellie can help around the orchard if she wants to earn her keep." "I'd like that," she said quickly. "I'm stronger than I look, and I'm a fast learner." The afternoon passed peacefully enough. Caleb showed Ellie around the orchard, explaining their organic growing practices and the different apple varieties they cultivated. Noah kept an eye on them from a distance as he worked, noting how his son's natural warmth seemed to help Ellie relax slightly. They shared a simple dinner of chicken and potatoes, with Caleb doing most of the talking about school and his plans to study agricultural science in college. Ellie listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and gradually letting her guard down. After dinner, Ellie insisted on helping with the dishes before returning to the cottage. Noah watched through the kitchen window as she walked back, her shoulders tense again now that she was alone. Later that night, Noah couldn't sleep. The events of the past 24 hours kept playing through his mind. Around midnight, he decided to check the property one last time, an old habit from his military days. As he passed the cottage, a soft sound caught his attention. Through the window, illuminated by a small lamp, he could see Ellie kneeling beside the narrow bed. Her hands were clasped tightly, her head bowed in prayer. "Please forgive me, Mom," she whispered, her voice carrying faintly through the thin walls. "I had to run. I had to." She paused, drawing a shaky breath. "God, please keep them from finding me. Please let me stay hidden until—" Her voice broke off into quiet sobs. Noah stepped back silently, feeling like an intruder on her private moment of desperation. Whatever trouble this girl was in, she wasn't just running from an angry boyfriend or a bad home situation. The fear in her prayer was too raw, too deep. He walked back to his house, the weight of his decision to help her settling heavily on his shoulders. It had been years since he let anyone new into their lives, but something about Ellie's situation stirred his protective instincts. He just hoped he wasn't putting Caleb at risk by following his conscience. The scent of fresh coffee and buttered toast filled the Riggins' small kitchen. Morning light streamed through the window above the sink, warming the worn linoleum floor. Noah stood at the counter, carefully preparing a breakfast tray with 3 plates of eggs and bacon. "You sure about this, Dad?" Caleb asked, leaning against the doorframe. His dark curls were still messy from sleep. Noah nodded, his weathered hand steady as he poured 3 mugs of coffee. "She needs to eat something proper. Been through enough already, by the looks of it." They walked together down the dirt path to the cottage, the morning dew dampening their boots. When they reached the door, Noah knocked gently. "Miss, brought you some breakfast." After a moment, the door creaked open. Ellie stood there, wearing the same clothes from yesterday, but her face was cleaner now. Dark circles ringed her eyes, suggesting she hadn't slept much. "Thank you," she said softly, stepping back to let them in. The cottage's main room was small but tidy. Ellie had already swept the floor and folded the blankets Noah had given her. They settled around the old wooden table, an awkward silence hanging in the air. "How'd you sleep?" Noah asked, passing her a plate. "Fine." Ellie's response was quick, automatic. She reached for the coffee mug, and her sleeve slipped back, revealing dark purple bruises circling her wrist like a bracelet. Noah's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. "Those look painful." Ellie quickly tugged her sleeve down, but her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her fork. "I just needed to disappear for a while, that's all." "We all need that sometimes," Caleb said, his voice kind. "Last year, after Mom died, I used to hide out in the orchard for hours." Noah glanced at his son, surprised by the personal admission. Caleb rarely talked about his mother's death. Ellie looked up, meeting Caleb's eyes. Something passed between them, a flash of understanding, perhaps recognition of shared pain. "The orchard seems like a good place to disappear," she said quietly. Noah cleared his throat. "Speaking of which, we've got some picking to do today. September apples are ready." He paused, studying Ellie's face. "You're welcome to help if you're feeling up to it." "I'd like that," she said, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. After breakfast, Noah showed Ellie how to properly pick apples, testing their readiness with a gentle twist, being careful not to damage the stems. Caleb worked nearby, his picking basket already half full. "You've got to feel for the ones that want to come off," Caleb explained, demonstrating the technique. "Like this." Ellie watched intently, then tried it herself. Her first attempt was too forceful, and the apple fell to the ground. "That's okay," Caleb laughed, retrieving it. "These ones are for cider anyway." As the morning wore on, Noah noticed something changing. Ellie's movements became more relaxed, her responses less guarded. When Caleb told a silly joke about why the apple was afraid to go home because it didn't have a parent, she actually laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even her. The sun climbed higher, warming the orchard rows. Noah worked steadily, keeping one eye on the young people as they moved between the trees. Caleb was showing Ellie how to spot the best fruit, pointing out the subtle differences in color that indicated ripeness. "See this one?" he said, reaching up to touch a perfectly red apple. "The way it catches the light, that's how you know it's Ed." "Ready." Ellie stretched to see better, and Caleb steadied her elbow when she wobbled on her tiptoes. The casual touch seemed to startle her at first, but she didn't pull away. Noah watched as they continued working, their conversation flowing more easily now. Caleb shared stories about growing up in the orchard, and Ellie asked questions about the different apple varieties. When she successfully filled her first basket, Caleb gave her a high five that made her smile. It was that smile that caught Noah's attention, not because of its brightness, though it did transform her worried face. No, what struck him was how it affected his son. Caleb's entire demeanor had shifted, lightened somehow. The shadow that had haunted him since his mother's passing seemed to lift, if only for a moment. Noah set down his picking basket, taking in the scene before him. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns on the ground. The sweet smell of ripe apples filled the air. And there was his son, laughing at something Ellie had said, his face alive with a joy Noah hadn't seen in far too long. For just a moment, watching them work together beneath the ancient apple trees, Noah could almost believe everything might turn out all right. The old pickup truck rattled down the dusty road toward town, its worn suspension creaking with each bump. Noah gripped the steering wheel, his weathered hands relaxed but steady. Beside him, Caleb drummed his fingers on the passenger door, humming along to an oldies station, playing softly on the radio. "We need feed for the chickens," Noah said, pulling out a wrinkled list from his shirt pocket. "And some more preserving jars for those apples we picked yesterday." "Don't forget coffee," Caleb added. "We're almost out, and you're not exactly pleasant without your morning cup, Dad." He flashed a teasing grin. Noah grunted, but couldn't hide his small smile. "Watch it, son." The general store's bell chimed as they entered Thompson's Market, the familiar musty smell of grain sacks and hardware greeting them. Mrs. Thompson, her gray hair tied back in a neat bun, waved from behind the counter. "Noah Riggins, haven't seen you in here for a while." She adjusted her glasses. "And Caleb? My word, you keep growing taller every time I see you." While Noah discussed feed prices with Mrs. Thompson, Caleb wandered toward the bulletin board near the entrance. It was cluttered with the usual notices: farm equipment for sale, church announcements, lost pets. But something new caught his eye. A missing person flyer, its edges still crisp and white, stood out among the faded papers. His heart skipped a beat as he studied the photograph. The girl in the image wore expensive clothes and perfectly styled blonde hair, but there was something familiar about her face, the shape of her eyes, the slight tilt of her smile. She looked like Dad, Caleb called out, his voice uncertain. "Come look at this." Noah excused himself from Mrs. Thompson and walked over. "What is it?" "This missing person poster. Don't you think she looks kind of like a lot of young women?" Noah cut him off, his tone firm but quiet. "We need to get those supplies loaded. Come help me with the feed sacks." Caleb lingered at the bulletin board for a moment longer, trying to memorize the details. The girl in the photo looked polished and privileged, nothing like their mud-covered visitor from the storm. But something nagged at him, a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. They loaded the truck in silence, the weight of unspoken questions hanging between them. As they drove home, Caleb noticed his father's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Dad, I know you're trying to help her," he said carefully. "But shouldn't we make sure she's not... Sometimes people need a safe place," Noah interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "Without questions, without judgment. Your mother taught me that." The mention of his mom made Caleb fall quiet. They remembered how she'd always left food out for strays, both animal and human. The back porch light had stayed on every night, a beacon for anyone who needed shelter. When they pulled up to the house, they found Ellie in the kitchen. She'd tied her dark hair back with a bandana and wore one of Mrs. Riggins' old aprons. The counter was dusted with flour, and the smell of something sweet filled the air. "I hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the mess. "I wanted to thank you both, so I'm making apple turnovers. The recipe was in that cookbook on the shelf." Noah's expression softened as he set down the grocery bags. "Martha's cookbook," he said quietly. "She'd be glad someone's using it." Caleb watched Ellie's practice movements as she crimped the pastry edges. Her hands were soft, uncalloused, not the hands of someone used to manual labor. Another detail that didn't quite match her story. They worked together to prepare dinner, moving around the small kitchen in an awkward dance and of politeness. Ellie proved skilled with a knife, precisely dicing vegetables for the stew. When she reached across the counter for the salt, her sleeve rode up, revealing fresh bruises that made Caleb's stomach clench. As they sat down to eat, the turnovers cooling on the windowsill, Caleb couldn't hold back anymore. "Do you miss them?" he asked. "Your family?" Ellie's hand froze halfway to her water glass. Something flickered across her face. Pain, fear, or maybe both. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. "Let's just say my family is complicated," she finally answered, her voice barely above a whisper. Noah cleared his throat. "More stew?" he offered, already reaching for her bowl, steering the conversation away from dangerous waters. But Caleb had seen enough. The missing person poster, the elegant hands, the haunted look in her eyes when family was mentioned. Their mysterious guest carried secrets as heavy as the storm clouds that had brought her to their door. The morning sun cast long shadows through the apple trees as Noah demonstrated the proper pruning technique to Ellie. His calloused hands moved with practiced precision, carefully selecting which branches to trim. The leather work gloves he wore were stained dark from years of orchard work, the fingertips worn thin from countless hours handling tools and tending trees. The orchard was quiet, except for the gentle snip of pruning shears and birdsong floating on the cool autumn breeze. Dew still clung to the grass beneath their feet, and the air carried the sweet scent of ripening apples mixed with the earthy smell of fallen leaves. Like this? Ellie asked, mimicking his movements on a nearby branch. Her cuts were hesitant, but getting better with each try. She had borrowed one of Caleb's old flannel shirts. The sleeves rolled up to her elbows, and her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. The bruises on her face had faded to pale yellow and green, but Noah still caught her, wincing when she moved too quickly. That's right, Noah nodded, watching her work with the careful attention of a born teacher. Just remember, clean cuts heal better than jagged ones. Same goes for trees as people, I suppose. He reached over to steady the branch she was working on, his weathered hands gentle despite their size. Ellie's hand stilled for a moment, the pruning shears suspended in mid-air. "You've been so kind to me, Mr. Riggins." "Most people wouldn't have," she trailed off, focusing intently on the branch in front of her, as if the gnarled wood held answers she couldn't find elsewhere. "Most people would have called the police right away." Noah leaned against the trunk of the apple tree, the rough bark pressing against his shoulder through his worn denim jacket. He studied her downturned face, noting the way her jaw tightened whenever she mentioned law enforcement. The morning light caught the fading yellows and greens of healing bruises along her jaw, and something in her posture, the way she held herself ready to run, reminded him of wounded animals he'd encountered in the woods. "Trust doesn't come easy to me either," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not anymore." Ellie looked up, surprise flickering across her features like sunlight through leaves. Noah hadn't shared much about himself in the days she'd been there. He'd been polite, even kind, but she'd sensed walls around him, the same kind she'd built around herself. "After Sarah, my wife, passed," he continued, his voice rough with old pain, "things got hard, real hard. The bank wanted to foreclose on the orchard. Sheriff Croft and his deputies started harassing Caleb, following him around town, making his life miserable for no reason other than spite." He shook his head slowly, his eyes distant as he stared out across the rows of apple trees. "Small-town politics. They never did like that Sarah married someone like me." "Because you're—" Ellie left the question hanging, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Because I'm black, yeah." Noah's smile was tired but gentle, tinged with the weariness of a man who'd fought too many battles. Sarah's family was old money, prominent folks around here for generations. Big house on Maple Street, Daddy owned the lumber mill. They cut her off when we got married, said she was throwing her life away. He adjusted his worn baseball cap, pulling the brim lower over his eyes. Then after she died, seemed like the whole town turned against us. Suddenly, every little thing we did was wrong. Caleb couldn't walk down Main Street without someone watching him like he was about to cause trouble. He paused, his hands working absently at a piece of bark. "So I understand about not trusting easy, about needing somewhere safe to hide for a while." Ellie's eyes welled with tears, the emotion hitting her unexpectedly. She quickly wiped them away with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek. "I'm so sorry about your wife and everything else." She gestured at the orchard around them, taking in the neat rows of trees, the carefully maintained paths, the obvious love that had gone into every detail. "But you built all this yourself, even with everyone against you?" "Had to," Noah said simply, the words carrying the weight of absolute necessity. "For Caleb, sometimes standing your ground is all you can do." He demonstrated another pruning cut, his movements sure and economical. Sarah loved this place more than anything. Used to say these trees were like family, needed love and attention to grow strong. She'd spend hours out here, talking to them like they could hear every word. His voice softened with memory. Maybe they could. They worked in companionable silence for a while, moving from tree to tree with the easy rhythm of shared labor. The rhythm of it was peaceful. Snip, clear away dead wood, move on to the next branch. Ellie's movements grew more confident as the morning wore on, her cuts becoming cleaner and more decisive. Noah found himself stealing glances at her face, seeing something he recognized in the set of her jaw, the same stubborn determination Sarah had shown when she decided to fight for their life together. The sun climbed higher, warming their backs and casting the orchard in golden light. A few late-season bees hummed lazily among the branches, and somewhere in the distance, Noah could hear the rhythmic thwack of Caleb chopping kindling behind the house. "Thank you," Ellie said suddenly, her voice thick with emotion that seemed to catch her off guard. She set down her pruning shears and turned to face him fully. "Not just for letting me stay, but for showing me it's possible to start over, to build something good, even when everything seems broken." Noah felt his throat tighten, the unexpected gratitude hitting him harder than he'd expected. He hadn't meant to share so much, but something about the girl's quiet strength reminded him of Sarah, the way she'd faced down her family's disapproval with her chin up and her hand in his. "You're welcome here as long as you need," he said gruffly, clearing his throat. Sometimes folks just need a chance to catch their breath and figure out their next move. That evening, Noah couldn't sleep. The old farmhouse creaked and settled around him, each familiar sound magnified in the darkness. The house felt too quiet, too empty, with Caleb spending the night at his friend Marcus's house working on a biology project about sustainable farming. Noah had encouraged the friendship. Marcus was one of the few kids in town whose parents didn't look at Caleb with suspicion or disdain. He got up from his bed, bare feet touching the cold hardwood floor, and pulled on his jeans and a thick sweater. Sleep had been elusive since Sarah's death, and checking the property had become a nightly ritual, part security patrol, part pilgrimage to the places where her memory felt strongest. As he approached the caretaker's cottage, its small windows glowing with warm lamplight, he heard muffled sounds coming from inside. The cottage had been Sarah's studio once, where she'd painted watercolors of the orchard through the seasons. Now it sheltered another soul seeking refuge. Concerned, he moved closer to the window, his boots silent on the dew-dampened grass. Through the thin curtains, he could see Ellie's silhouette kneeling beside the narrow bed, her shoulders shaking. Her voice drifted out, broken by soft sobs that tore at his heart. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she was whispering, the words barely audible through the glass. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I just wanted to do the right thing. But now they'll kill me if they find me. And maybe you too. I should have just kept quiet. I should have pretended I never saw anything." Noah stepped back from the window, his heart heavy with the weight of her anguish. Whatever trouble the girl was in, it was. Clearly worse than he'd imagined, deeper and more dangerous than a simple case of domestic violence or a runaway teenager. The fear in her voice spoke of threats that went beyond anything he'd initially considered. He walked back to his house slowly, the weight of responsibility settling deeper onto his shoulders, like a heavy coat he couldn't remove. The gravel crunched softly under his feet, and an owl called from somewhere in the darkness beyond the orchard. He'd promised her safety, and he meant to keep that promise, no matter what storm was coming their way or how fierce the winds might blow. Noah sat at his worn kitchen table, the familiar grooves and scratches in the wood telling stories of countless meals shared with Caleb over the years. His coffee had long since grown cold beside his laptop, a bitter reminder of how distracted he'd become. The morning light filtered through the dusty window, casting golden streaks across the screen as his fingers hesitantly hovered over the keyboard. He took a deep breath and typed "Governor Whitmore's daughter missing" into the search bar. His heart thumped heavily in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears as news articles filled the screen like puzzle pieces of a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to complete. The first headline made his mouth go dry, his throat constricting, as if someone had wrapped invisible hands around his neck. "Governor's daughter vanishes after private school gala." Below it was a photograph that made him grip the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. A younger, more polished version of Ellie stood beside Governor Margaret Whitmore at some political event, their bodies angled toward each other in practice poses. Both women wore elegant dresses, the kind that cost more than Noah made in a month, and practiced smiles that never quite reached their eyes. But it was their eyes that caught his attention and held it like a vice, the same distinctive shade of green, slightly turned up at the corners, with that particular way of looking both vulnerable and defiant at the same time. Ella Whitmore, 19, was last seen leaving the Pemberton Academy Spring Gala at approximately 11:30 p.m. on. Noah rubbed his temples, the beginning of a headache forming as he scanned through the article. The girl in the photographs had perfectly styled blonde hair that caught the camera flash just so, and designer clothes that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. It was a far cry from the mud-covered, terrified young woman who'd appeared in his orchard like a ghost seeking sanctuary. But as he clicked through more images, charity events, political rallies, family portraits from better days, the similarities became impossible to ignore, mounting like evidence in a case he didn't want to solve. He opened another tab with trembling fingers, finding a video of the governor's press conference about her daughter's disappearance. Margaret Whitmore stood at a polished wooden podium, her posture erect and professional, but Noah could see the cracks in her armor. Her voice remained steady as she read from prepared remarks, but her hands trembled against the microphone as she pleaded for information about Ella's whereabouts. The camera zoomed in on her face, and Noah leaned closer to the screen, studying the governor's features with the intensity of a man examining a map in enemy territory. The same high cheekbones he'd seen on the girl currently staying in his caretaker's cottage, The same delicate curve of the jaw, the same way of pressing her lips together when fighting back tears. A floorboard creaked upstairs, the old house announcing Caleb's movements like a faithful sentinel. Noah quickly closed the laptop, his fingers moving faster than his racing thoughts as his son's footsteps descended the stairs with the unhurried pace of someone without the weight of terrible secrets on their shoulders. Caleb appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his pajamas with cartoon characters that made him look younger than his 17 years. His hair was tousled from sleep, sticking up in directions that defied gravity, and he wore that soft, unguarded expression people have when they first wake up, before the day's worries settle in. "Morning, Dad," Caleb yawned, stretching his arms above his head as he headed straight for the cereal box on the counter. The normalcy of the moment, his son shuffling around the kitchen in worn slippers, the familiar rattle of cereal hitting the bowl, felt surreal against the backdrop of Noah's growing realization. Noah forced a casual tone, though his voice came out slightly rougher than intended. "Just catching up on some news." He stood on unsteady legs, pouring his cold coffee down the sink and watching the dark liquid swirl down the drain like his peaceful morning routine. Through the window, he could see Ellie, or Ella, he corrected mentally, the name feeling foreign and dangerous in his thoughts, already out in the orchard. She moved between the trees with growing confidence, gathering fallen apples into a wicker basket, her movements more relaxed than they'd been just days ago. "I'm gonna help Ellie with the morning chores," Caleb announced, quickly finishing his breakfast with the efficiency of a teenager who had places to be and people to see. He rinsed his bowl in the sink, already mentally transitioning from sleepy son to helpful friend. Noah nodded absently, his mind racing through possibilities and consequences while his body went through the motions of normal morning behavior. He waited until Caleb had grabbed his jacket and headed outside, the screen door closing with its familiar squeak, before returning to his research with the determination of a man who needed answers, even if those answers would shatter the fragile peace they'd found. This time, he focused on recent news about the governor herself, diving deeper into the political waters that might have driven her daughter to his doorstep. Stories about corruption investigations filled his screen, each headline more ominous than the last. There were rumors of scandal whispered in political circles, mentions of threats received by the governor's office, and speculation about connections to organized crime. One particular article caught his eye and held it like a hook. Sources claim Governor Whitmore's office connected to trafficking investigation. His veteran instincts, long dormant but never truly dead, began firing warning signals through his nervous system, like alarms in a bunker under attack. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. If Ellie really was Ella Whitmore, she wasn't just running from family troubles or an abusive boyfriend. She was running from something far more dangerous, something with the power to destroy lives and silence witnesses permanently. Noah stood and walked to the window, his legs feeling heavy as lead. Outside, Caleb had joined Ellie near the old apple trees, their voices carrying on the morning breeze. She was showing him something in her basket, probably the morning's harvest of fallen fruit, and explaining something with animated gestures. The sun caught her profile just right, illuminating her features like a painter's carefully planned portrait. And that's when he noticed it. A small crescent-shaped birthmark just below her left ear, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. His eyes darted back to the laptop screen, fingers flying over the keys as he searched for close-up photos. There, a campaign event photo showing Ella Whitmore laughing at something off-camera, her head tilted just enough to reveal the exact same mark in the exact same place. Noah's breath caught in his throat as the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place with an almost audible snap. The weight of the truth settled heavily on his shoulders like a yoke he hadn't asked for but couldn't put down. Every nervous glance over her shoulder when a car passed on the distant road, every vague reference to her complicated family situation, every whispered prayer he'd heard drifting from the cottage in the dark hours before dawn, it all made perfect, terrible sense now. The governor's daughter wasn't just missing from some private school dormitory. She was hiding here, in his orchard, among his apple trees, befriending his son, trusting them with her life, whether she realized it or not. His protective instincts warred violently with his fear, creating a storm of conflicting emotions in his chest. Having her here put them all at risk. Caleb, himself, maybe even the neighbors who'd finally started warming up to them again. But sending her away, turning her out into a world where powerful people wanted her silenced, might be signing her death warrant with his own hand. The moral weight of that choice pressed down on him like a mountain. Outside, Caleb said something that made Ellie laugh. the sound carrying through the morning air like music from a simpler time. They stood by the orchard fence, sunlight dancing through the leaves above them in patterns of gold and green, looking for all the world, like two normal teenagers without a care in the world. Caleb was pointing at something in the distance, probably explaining the layout of the property, while Ellie listened with the kind of genuine interest that spoke of someone hungry for normal human connection. Noah pressed his palm against the cool window glass, watching them with the intensity of a man memorizing a scene he might never see again. The girl's shoulders had gradually lost their tension over the past few days, her smile becoming more genuine with each passing hour, her eyes less haunted by whatever horrors had driven her to his door. She was healing here, finding something she'd lost or maybe never had. But now he understood the true weight of what he'd taken on by sheltering her, the invisible target he'd painted on all their backs. The sound of their laughter floated through the window again, but this time it sent a chill down Noah's spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. His face drained of color as the full implications hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't just harboring a runaway teenager with family problems. He was hiding the daughter of the most powerful person in the state, possibly from people who had the resources and motivation to make problems disappear permanently. Through the window, he watched the two teenagers, so caught up in their own world of shared jokes and growing friendship, so blissfully unaware of the gravity of what he'd just discovered. Caleb was showing Ellie how to properly examine an apple for worm damage, his hands gentle and patient as he taught her something their father had taught him years ago. The sight should have warmed Noah's heart, but instead it filled him with a cold dread that settled in his bones like winter frost. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee mug, muscle memory seeking comfort in routine, only to find it empty, much like the simple, quiet life he'd been carefully rebuilding just days ago, before a desperate girl appeared in his orchard during a storm and changed everything forever. The moon cast long shadows through the orchard's twisted branches as Noah made his way to the caretaker's cottage. His boots crunched on fallen leaves, each step heavy with the weight of what he'd discovered. The porch light cast a warm glow, and through the window, he could see Ellie, as she called herself, sketching in a notebook. He knocked softly. "Mind if I come in?" She looked up, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course not. She closed her notebook quickly, tucking it beneath a cushion. The cottage was small but tidy. A few wildflowers sat in a mason jar on the windowsill, and the quilt he'd given her was neatly folded on the bed. Noah settled into the weathered armchair across from her, his hands clasped together. "I need to ask you something," he said quietly, "and I need you to be honest with me." Ella's shoulders tensed. She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture he'd seen her make whenever she felt threatened. "Okay," she whispered. "Your mother." Noah paused, choosing his words carefully. "She's worried about you, isn't she?" "Very worried." The color drained from Ella's face. Her fingers gripped the edge of the sofa until her knuckles turned white. "How did you?" "The missing person flyer Caleb saw in town." "I looked it up." Noah leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "You're Ella Whitmore, aren't you? The governor's daughter." Tears welled up in her eyes. She pressed her hands to her face, her shoulders shaking. For a long moment, the only sound was her muffled sobbing and the distant chorus of crickets. "I never meant to lie to you," she finally managed, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. I couldn't tell anyone. They're watching everything, everyone." "Who's watching, Ella?" The name seemed to break something loose in her. "People I trusted, people close to my mother." She drew a shaky breath. "I found something. Documents, recordings. They're trafficking people, Noah. Young girls, mostly, using my mother's campaign events as cover." Her voice cracked. "These girls, some of them are younger than Caleb." Noah felt sick to his stomach. "Does your mother know?" Ella nodded, wiping her eyes. "She's the one who told me to run. When I showed her what I'd found, she changed. I'd never seen her so scared. She pulled her knees up to her chest. She tried to protect me, sent me to a safe house. But someone betrayed us. They found me there. How did you escape?" "One of the guards. He felt sorry for me. Left a door unlocked." She shuddered. "I just ran. Kept running until I couldn't anymore. Then I found your orchard." Noah stood up and paced. The small room, his mind racing. Everything made sense now. Her fear of the police, the bruises, the nightmares. He stopped at the window, looking out at his peaceful orchard, knowing it might not stay peaceful for long. "These people," he said slowly, "they're still looking for you. They won't stop." Ella's voice was barely above a whisper. "The evidence I found, it could destroy them, put them in prison for life." They think I have it with me, but she touched her temple. It's all up here. Names, dates, locations, everything. Noah turned back to face her. In the lamplight, she looked so young, so vulnerable. He thought of his own son, just a few years younger than her. The thought of Caleb being hunted like this made his chest tighten. "I'll leave," Ella said suddenly, standing up. "I've put you and Caleb in enough danger already." "I can't." "No." Noah's voice was firm. "You're not going anywhere." She stared at him, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "But they'll come." Looking. "Let 'em look." Noah stepped closer, putting his hands on her shoulders. "You're safe here, Ella. We'll figure this out together." "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk everything for me?" Noah thought of his late wife, how she'd always said doing the right thing wasn't about counting the cost. Because it's what decent folks do, and because no one deserves to face this alone. Ella broke down then, really broke down, sobbing into his shoulder as he held her like he would his own daughter. When she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, he saw a glimmer of hope in her face that hadn't been there before. Noah's expression grew serious. "But you need to understand something." He guided her to sit back down, taking the chair across from her again. "If they find you here, they'll come for us too. Not just you, me, and Caleb as well. We need to be smart about this." "Careful." Ella nodded, her face pale but determined. "I understand. I won't let anything happen to Caleb or you. You've both been so kind to me." "Then we do this together," Noah said firmly. "But no more secrets. Deal?" "Deal." She managed a weak smile, then hesitated. "Noah? Yes? Thank you for not turning me away, for believing me." He nodded, standing up to leave. The night had grown late, and they both needed rest. At the door, he paused, looking back at the young woman who'd brought such unexpected change to their quiet lives. "Get some sleep, Ella. Tomorrow, we'll start figuring out how to keep you safe." Morning sunlight streamed through the cottage windows as Ella measured flour into a mixing bowl. The kitchen counter was dusted white, and the sweet smell of cinnamon filled the air. Caleb stood beside her, carefully peeling apples with practiced hands. "You're pretty good at that," Ella said, watching his fingers guide the peeler in one long, continuous strip. "Years of practice," Caleb grinned. "Dad says I started helping in the orchard before I could walk." Ella sifted the flour, sugar, and spices together. "Must be nice, growing up in one place, having roots." "What was it like?" Caleb asked softly. "Growing up in the governor's mansion?" Ella's hands stilled for a moment. After last night's confession to Noah, she felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter for sharing her truth, but weighted by the memories it stirred up. Like living in a museum. Everything perfect, polished, untouchable. She began cutting cold butter into the flour mixture. Mom was always performing. Every dinner was a political event. Every conversation calculated. "That sounds lonely," Caleb said, starting on another apple. It was. Ella's fingers worked the dough methodically. "When I was little, I used to pretend the security guards were my friends. I'd make up stories about their lives, give them nicknames." She smiled sadly. "One of them, James, he'd sometimes sneak me candy when Mom was too busy for dinner." Caleb dumped the sliced apples into a bowl. "My mom used to sing while she cooked. Dad says the whole house would smell like cinnamon and love." "What happened to her?" Ella asked gently. "Cancer." Caleb's voice was quiet but steady. 3 years ago, Dad. He hasn't been the same since." They worked in companionable silence for a while, Ella rolling out the pie crust while Caleb mixed the apple filling with sugar and spices. "After I found out about the trafficking ring," Ella continued suddenly, "Mom said she was protecting me by sending me away, but it felt more like being in prison. The safe house was just another cage." Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the rolled dough. Different guards, same loneliness. Caleb helped her drape the crust into the pie pan. "Is that why you ran?" "Partly." Ella began arranging apple slices in neat circles, but mostly because I realized some of the guards weren't there to protect me. They were there to keep me quiet. She brushed egg wash onto the crust edges. "The night I escaped, I overheard them talking about permanent solutions." "I'm glad you found us," Caleb said simply, helping her lattice the top crust. The oven timer dinged, and they slid the pie onto the center rack. While it baked, they cleaned up together, falling into an easy rhythm of washing and drying dishes. "You know what's weird?" Ella said, wiping down the counter. "I feel more safe in this cottage than I ever did in that mansion. More real." Later that evening, Noah came in from the orchard to find the kitchen table set for dinner. A golden brown pie cooled on the windowsill, its aroma mingling with the smell of chicken and vegetables. "Smells amazing in here," he said, washing up at the sink. "Ella's quite the baker," Caleb said proudly. "You should have seen her crimping that crust." "My one rebellion against Mom's perfect world," Ella explained, serving up plates. "The kitchen staff taught me when she was busy with campaigns." They settled around the table, and Noah said grace. Simple words of thanks for food and safety. As they ate, Caleb told stories about his day at school, and Ella shared memories of the kind cook who'd taught her to bake. "He used to say that love was the secret ingredient," she said, laughing. "Mom always rolled her eyes at that." "Well, he wasn't wrong," Noah said quietly, tasting the pie. "This is exactly how Sarah used to make it." Caleb's eyes widened. Dad. It was the first time Noah had mentioned his late wife's name without pain clouding his features. He looked at Ella and Caleb, at the warm kitchen and the half-eaten pie, and something in his chest loosened. The cottage felt alive again, filled with the kind of comfortable chatter that had been missing for so long. Ella told them about the time she'd accidentally set off the mansion's security system trying to sneak cookies at midnight. And soon, they were all laughing. Noah found himself sharing his own story about teaching a young Caleb to drive the tractor, ending with both of them covered in mud. As the evening wore on, the shadows grew longer outside, but inside the cottage, time seemed to slow down. They lingered over second helpings of pie, trading stories, and quiet laughs. For a moment, Noah could almost forget about the danger lurking beyond their orchard, about the weight of secrets and fears. Looking at these two young people, his son and this brave, broken girl who'd somehow become part of their lives, Noah felt something he hadn't experienced in years: the warm, steady pulse of family. In that moment, with the dishes cleared and the last rays of sunset painting the kitchen walls golden, Noah realized they were all healing each other in small, precious ways. Without meaning to, they'd created something as sweet and sturdy as Ella's apple pie. A shelter made of trust, understanding, and shared laughter. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the orchard as Caleb and Ella walked between the rows of apple trees, carrying baskets of freshly picked fruit. The air was crisp with early autumn, and fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet. "You know," Caleb said, setting down his basket to rest, "this place used to be the heart of the community. Every fall, we'd have this huge harvest festival." Ella tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "What happened to it?" "After Mom died, Dad kind of withdrew. The town wasn't exactly kind to us either." Caleb kicked at a fallen apple. "Some folks spread rumors about Dad, said terrible things because he's different from them. The festival just stopped." Ella's eyes softened as she watched a group of birds take flight from a nearby tree. "That must have been hard for both of you." "Yeah," Caleb's voice grew quiet. "But you know what? I think it's time we brought it back." Ella turned to him, surprised. "The festival? Why not?" Caleb's eyes lit up with excitement. "The orchard's doing better this year. We could have hay rides, apple picking, maybe even a pie contest." He gestured at the rows of trees stretching into the distance. "This place deserves to be full of life again." "But would people come?" Ella asked, remembering Noah's words about the town's attitude. "They might," Caleb said, warming to the idea. "Mrs. Thompson at the general store always asks about our apples. And Mr. Chen from the hardware store still talks about Mom's apple butter recipe." They made their way back to the barn, where Noah was fixing an old tractor. The sound of metal on metal rang out as he worked. "Dad," Caleb called out. "We have an idea." Noah slid out from under the tractor, wiping his hands on an old rag. His face was smudged with grease. "What kind of idea?" "The harvest festival," Caleb said. "We should bring it back." Noah's expression darkened slightly. "Son, you know how things are with the town, but it could be different now," Ella interrupted gently. "Sometimes people just need a reason to come together again." Noah looked at her, then at his son's hopeful face. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sound of wind in the trees. "We could start small," Caleb pressed. "Just a weekend thing. Apple picking, some games for the kids. Ella makes amazing pies. We could have a baking contest." "I could help organize everything," Ella offered. "It would give me something to focus on, and," she hesitated, "it feels right to give back. After all you've done for me." Noah ran a hand through his gray-streaked hair. "It's been 5 years since the last festival." "Maybe that's long enough," Caleb said quietly. Something shifted in Noah's eyes, a softening, like ice beginning to thaw. "You really want to do this?" "Yes," Caleb and Ella said in unison, then laughed. "We'll need to fix up the old pavilion," Noah said slowly, "and the parking area needs work." "Is that a yes?" Caleb asked, grinning. Noah sighed, but there was a hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. "It's we'll see. But first, need to make a list of what needs doing." They spent the next hour planning, with Ella taking notes in a small notebook she'd borrowed from Caleb. The more they talked, the more the idea took shape. Games for children, local vendors selling crafts, music from the church band, and of course, plenty of apple-themed treats. "We could hang lights in the trees," Ella suggested, her voice growing animated, "and maybe set up some hay bales for seating." "The Henderson kids could help with face painting," Caleb added. "They're always looking for ways to earn extra money." Noah watched them both, their excitement infectious. It reminded him of years ago when Sarah would spend weeks preparing for the festival, turning their orchard into a place of magic and celebration. As evening approached, they moved inside the house. While Noah made dinner, Ella sat at the kitchen table with paper and pencils. Her hand moved swiftly across the page as she sketched, occasionally pausing to erase or adjust a line. Noah stirred the pot of stew on the stove, glancing over at her bent head. The kitchen light caught the gold in her hair, and for a moment, she looked so young and unburdened that his heart ached. It was easy to forget sometimes that she carried such heavy secrets. "What are you drawing?" Caleb asked, peering over her shoulder. "A flyer design?" Ella replied, not looking up. "I used to do some art in school. I thought maybe we could post these around town." She held up the sketch. At the top, in flowing letters, she'd written, "Riggins Orchard Fall Harvest Festival." Below was a detailed drawing of the orchard, with trees heavy with apples and families walking among them. Lanterns hung from branches, and in the background, the old barn stood warm and welcoming. "That's beautiful," Caleb breathed. Noah wiped his hands on a dish towel and came closer to look. The drawing captured not just what the orchard was, but what it could be, again a place of community and joy. When Ella finally looked up, her eyes were bright with something Noah hadn't seen before. Hope. Real, unguarded hope. It transformed her face, erasing the shadows that usually lurked there. "Do you think it might work?" she asked softly. Noah looked at the drawing again, at the way she'd captured the spirit of what the festival had once been. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I think it might." Golden autumn light spilled across the orchard as Noah watched a small crowd gather near his barn. He blinked twice, hardly believing his eyes. Mrs. Peterson from the bakery stood chatting with old Mr. Jenkins, both holding boxes of supplies. Behind them, the Wilson brothers carried folding tables from their truck. "Need any help setting those up?" Noah called out, his voice scratchy from disuse. It had been years since he'd spoken to most of these people. "We got it, Noah," Tom Wilson answered with a friendly nod. "Heard you're bringing back the Harvest Festival. About time, if you ask." "Me." Noah's chest tightened with emotion. He remembered when the festival had been the highlight of every fall, before Sarah passed, before the town turned its back on him. Now here they were, trickling back like winter birds returning in spring. Ella emerged from the cottage, carrying a stack of hand-drawn posters. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat braid, and she wore one of Sarah's old aprons. She moved with quiet purpose, directing people with gentle suggestions rather than orders. "Mrs. Peterson, your pies would be perfect near the entrance," she said, pointing to a spot under the old oak tree. "The shade will keep them fresh longer." The older woman beamed. "You have your grandmother's eye for detail, dear," she said, assuming Ella was a relative of Noah's late wife. The lie hurt, but it was safer this way. Throughout the morning, more townspeople arrived. Some brought food, others offered decorations or helped clear paths between the trees. Noah noticed how naturally Ella handled each person, her political upbringing showing in the way she remembered names and made everyone feel valued. Caleb worked alongside her, their movements in sync as they organized volunteers. His son's eyes sparkled whenever Ella spoke, and Noah recognized the look. It was the same way he'd once gazed at Sarah. "Your girl's got quite a talent for bringing people together," Sheriff Croft commented, appearing suddenly beside Noah. The older man's heart skipped a beat, but he kept his face neutral. "She takes after her mother," Noah replied carefully, praying the sheriff wouldn't look too closely at the young woman who was supposed to be his niece. "Didn't know you had a sister?" "Noah, there's a lot you don't know about me, Sheriff." The tension broke as Jenny Miller's little girls ran past, giggling and waving streamers. The sheriff tipped his hat and moved on, but Noah's unease lingered. As afternoon faded toward evening, the transformation of the orchard was remarkable. Tables lined the main path, already decorated with autumn leaves and mason jars filled with wildflowers. The barn door stood open, revealing space cleared for dancing. The smell of apple cider drifted from where Mr. Jenkins had set up his press. "Dad," Caleb called from the back of his pickup truck, "we're going to start hanging the lanterns. Can you help?" Noah joined his son and Ella as they unloaded boxes of paper lanterns. They'd spent evenings stringing them with lights, and now they glowed softly in the deepening dusk. "We'll create paths of light," Ella explained, her face animated, leading people through the whole orchard. She pointed to different areas. "String them between the trees here, then over there, and circle back to the barn." They worked steadily, Caleb climbing the ladder while Ella handed up lanterns and Noah secured the lines. Other volunteers joined in until streams of gentle light began crisscrossing through the branches. "It's like stars coming down to Earth," one of the Miller girls whispered, and Noah had to agree. The sight brought back memories of festivals past, of Sarah's laughter mixing with fiddle music, of communities coming together to celebrate the harvest. As the last helpers departed for the evening, Ella and Caleb continued hanging lanterns in a quiet corner of the orchard. Noah watched from a distance as they worked in comfortable silence, their movements natural and trusting. His son would hand Ella a lantern, their fingers brushing. She would smile up at him as he secured each light. The setting sun painted everything in soft gold and rose, catching in Ella's hair as she stepped back to admire their work. She turned to Caleb, her face glowing in the lantern light. "This feels like home," she whispered, just loud enough for Noah to hear. The simple truth in those words made Noah's throat tight. This young woman, who had arrived broken and terrified in the rain, had somehow helped heal not just herself, but his family, and now, perhaps the whole town. Yet danger still lurked behind her quiet happiness, and Noah knew their peaceful moments were borrowed time. For now, though, he let them have this moment. Two young people surrounded by gentle light, finding something like hope in each other's eyes. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows through the apple trees as Caleb carried a wooden ladder toward the eastern edge of the orchard. Ella followed behind, her arms full of paper lanterns they'd spent the morning making. The air held that perfect crispness of mid-autumn, carrying the sweet scent of ripening fruit. "Here should work," Caleb said, setting up the ladder against a sturdy branch. "We can string them between these 3 trees." He turned to help Ella with her load, their fingers brushing as he took some of the lanterns. Her cheeks colored slightly, matching the rosy apples hanging above them. "I can't remember the last time I made something with my own hands," Ella admitted, smoothing out one of the rice paper lanterns. "At home, everything was always done for us, perfectly arranged, perfectly controlled." She traced the delicate folds they'd created together. "These aren't perfect, but I like them better." Caleb climbed a few rungs up the ladder, testing its stability. Sometimes the best things aren't perfect. He glanced down at her with a warm smile. "Like this old orchard. Dad says it's not as productive as the commercial farms, but every apple tastes better because it grew in its own time." While they worked, stringing lanterns between the trees, Ella watched Caleb's sure movements. He had his father's gentle strength, but there was something else there too, a lightness, an ease with himself that made her feel safe. "What do you want to do?" she asked suddenly. "After high school, I mean." Caleb secured another lantern before answering. "I want to study sustainable agriculture, learn how to make this place thrive without hurting the land." His voice grew, passionate as he continued. "There's so much we could do here. Companion planting, natural pest control, maybe even a greenhouse for year-round growing." "You really love it here," Ella observed softly. "It's more than that." Caleb climbed down, moving the ladder to the next position. "This orchard, it's like it has a heartbeat. Every season brings something new, but it's always alive, always giving." He paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "Sorry, that probably sounds silly." "No," Ella shook her head quickly. "It doesn't sound silly at all." She helped him steady the ladder. "I never knew what I wanted before. Everything was planned out. College, career in politics, following my mother's footsteps. But now?" She trailed off, lost in thought. "Now what?" Caleb prompted gently. "Now I know what it feels like to choose something for myself. To create instead of just existing in someone else's plan." She lifted another lantern, passing it up to him. "Even if I can't stay forever, I'll never forget what that feels like." They worked in comfortable silence for a while. the lanterns taking shape in elegant arcs between the trees. As the sun dipped lower, the first stars began appearing in the darkening eastern sky. "Dad told me about your art," Caleb said eventually. "He said he saw some of your sketches." Ella tensed slightly but relaxed when she saw only genuine interest in his expression. "It was the one thing that was truly mine. Even when they sent me away for my protection, I kept drawing. It helped me remember who I was. Would you show me sometime?" The question was simple, but Ella heard the deeper meaning. "Trust me with your truth." She nodded slowly. "I'd like that." As they finished hanging the last lantern, Caleb jumped down from the ladder. "Want to see how they look from the hill?" he asked, offering his hand without pressure or expectation. Ella looked at his extended hand, remembering all the times she'd been told who to trust, who to avoid, how to act. But here, in the growing dusk of the orchard, she found herself reaching out, her fingers fitting naturally between his. They walked together through the rows of trees, their joined hands swaying gently between them. Neither spoke, but the silence felt right, like the pause between musical notes that makes the melody sweeter. When they reached the small rise overlooking their work, they stopped. The paper lanterns hung like peaceful stars among the trees, promising light and warmth for the festival to come. But in that moment, Ella wasn't thinking about the festival or the future. She was present in a way she'd never been before, aware of the rough warmth of Caleb's hand, the soft whisper of leaves in the evening breeze, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she'd found something real. Caleb squeezed her hand gently, and Ella squeezed back, their fingers remaining intertwined as they watched the first fireflies begin their dance among the waiting lanterns. The October morning dawned crisp and clear over Noah's orchard, painting the sky in soft pastels that promised a perfect autumn day. Strings of unlit paper lanterns swayed between the apple trees like delicate spiderwebs catching the early light, each one carefully hung by volunteers who'd arrived before sunrise. Noah stood on his weathered porch, steam rising from his coffee mug as it warmed his calloused hands, watching neighbors he hadn't spoken to in years arrange folding tables and position hay bales in careful circles throughout the orchard. The sight stirred something deep in his chest, a mixture of hope and disbelief that his home could feel this welcoming again. "Everything's ready in the kitchen," Ella called from behind him, her voice carrying the kind of quiet satisfaction that comes from honest work. She stepped out onto the porch, wiping flour-dusted hands on her blue gingham apron, the one Sarah used to wear during harvest season. The smell of fresh apple pies and warm cinnamon followed her like a sweet benediction, mixing with the crisp morning air. "Mrs. Henderson just arrived with 3 peach cobblers, and I think she's planning to stay all day to make sure people appreciate them properly." Noah chuckled, a sound that felt rusty but genuine. "First time in years this place has seen so many people willing to stick around." He paused, watching a group of teenagers string lights between the barn and the old oak tree. Sarah always said this orchard was meant for celebrating. The mention of his late wife no longer felt like a blade to the heart, but more like a gentle ache, the kind that comes with precious memories rather than raw grief. By noon, cars lined the dusty road leading to the orchard like a ribbon of hope stretching back toward town. Pickup trucks parked alongside sedans, creating an unlikely harmony that reflected the day's spirit. Children darted between the trees in small packs, their bright laughter mixing with the cheerful twang of guitars as local musicians claimed their spot near the main clearing. The scent of barbecue smoke and sweet apple treats filled the crisp air, creating an atmosphere so warm and inviting that even the most reserved neighbors found themselves lingering longer than planned. Ella had claimed the apple pressing station as her domain, and Noah watched with quiet amazement as she showed a stream of wide-eyed children how to turn fresh apples into golden cider. Her dark hair was tied back with a red bandana that brought out the color in her cheeks, and her eyes sparkled with genuine joy as she helped tiny hands work the wooden press. Small fingers struggled with the heavy lever, but Ella's patient guidance turned each attempt into a triumph. For the first time since she'd arrived at the orchard, Noah saw none of the fear that usually shadowed her delicate features. Here, surrounded by innocent laughter and the simple pleasure of making something good with her hands, she looked like any young woman enjoying a perfect autumn day. "Dad!" Caleb jogged up to him, his face flushed with excitement and the kind of pure happiness Noah hadn't seen from his son in far too long. The Wilsons brought their horses, both of them. They're giving rides to the little ones up near the north field, and there's already a line forming. "Mrs. Patterson says it reminds her of the festivals they used to have when she was growing up. Families had spread colorful quilts and worn blankets under the apple trees, creating intimate circles where neighbors shared homemade food and long-forgotten stories. The sound of conversation and laughter rose and fell like gentle music, punctuated by the occasional squeal of delight from children discovering the simple joy of fresh apple cider. Old Mr. Peterson, who hadn't spoken to Noah since Sarah's funeral 3 years ago, actually sought him out to shake his hand and compliment the quality of the fresh cider. His weathered face bore a sheepish expression that spoke of regret and the desire for reconciliation. The town's long-standing coldness seemed to thaw under the golden autumn sun, melting away like morning frost. As afternoon mellowed toward evening, painting the sky in deeper shades of amber and rose, even more people arrived. Someone had organized an impromptu game of horseshoes near the old barn, and the metallic ring of horseshoes hitting stakes added a cheerful percussion to the day's symphony. Teenagers gathered around the musicians in a loose circle, some brave souls attempting to dance to the lively fiddle tunes, while others clapped along with varying degrees of rhythm. The festival had taken on a life of its own, breathing warmth and community spirit back into a town that had forgotten how to come together in celebration rather than obligation. "This was such a wonderful idea," Mrs. Tucker said, her voice warm with genuine appreciation as she patted Noah's arm with a gentleness that spoke of shared understanding. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears of joy. Sarah would have absolutely loved seeing the orchard come alive like this again. She always said this place had magic in it. Noah's chest tightened at the mention of his beloved wife. But for once, the pain wasn't sharp and cutting. Instead, it felt like a gentle embrace, as if Sarah's spirit somehow blessed this gathering. He watched as Caleb helped Ella light the first paper lanterns of the evening, their soft amber glow beginning to dot the deepening purple sky like earthbound stars. The bonfire crackled to life as dust settled over the orchard like a comfortable blanket. Paper lanterns swayed overhead in the gentle evening breeze, casting warm circles of golden light across faces that glowed with contentment and genuine happiness. Someone had produced a fiddle from seemingly nowhere, and its cheerful, dancing notes wove through the evening air like an invitation to forget all troubles and simply enjoy this moment of perfect community harmony. Ella stood near the flickering fire, its warm light dancing across her face and highlighting the peaceful expression she wore. She looked completely different here, not like the governor's polished daughter from those missing person flyers, not like the frightened runaway who'd appeared behind his barn, but like she truly belonged among these simple, honest people who valued character over pedigree. Caleb approached her slowly, his movements careful and respectful, saying something close to her ear that made her laugh with pure, unguarded delight. Noah's heart swelled as he watched his son hold out his hand to Ella with the kind of gentle gallantry that would have made Sarah proud. Ella hesitated for just a moment, her eyes searching Caleb's face as if looking for reassurance, before taking his offered hand and allowing him to lead her in a slow, careful dance near the crackling flames. Other couples gradually joined them, but Noah couldn't tear his eyes away from these two young people who'd brought such unexpected light and purpose back into his carefully guarded life. They moved together with natural grace, as if they'd known each other for years instead of the mere weeks since that stormy night when everything changed. Caleb leaned down to say something close to Ella's ear, his words meant for her alone, and she responded with a smile that transformed her entire face. Not her usual careful protective smile, but something real and unguarded and beautiful. The firelight caught the happiness dancing in their eyes, the way they seemed to forget anyone else was watching as they swayed together to the fiddle's sweet melody. Something tight and protective in Noah's chest loosened as he watched them, replaced by a warmth he'd almost forgotten was possible. The orchard hadn't felt this alive, this full of joy and hope, since Sarah had walked among these same trees. The music floating through the crisp air, the genuine laughter echoing from every corner of his property, the way the community had come together to celebrate rather than merely endure, it all felt like healing made manifest, like hope taking root in ground that had been fallow too long. Maybe this is what healing looks like, Noah murmured to himself, his words carried away by the gentle night breeze as the fiddle played on and the paper lanterns glowed overhead like promises of better days to come. The dancing continued around the bonfire, and Noah realized with a start that his son was no longer the withdrawn, grief-stricken teenager who'd struggled so desperately after losing his mother. Here, under the lantern-lit sky, Caleb moved with confidence and joy, his natural kindness shining as brightly as the flames. And Ella, She danced with a freedom Noah hadn't seen before, as if she too had finally found something worth holding on to in this simple celebration, under the vast canopy of stars beginning to twinkle overhead. The morning after the festival, empty paper lanterns hung limp in the trees. Fallen leaves crunched under Noah's boots as he walked the orchard grounds, picking up scattered cups and paper plates from the night before. His muscles ached from dancing something he hadn't done since Sarah passed. But it was a good kind of ache, the kind that reminded him he was still alive. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The screen showed a number he hadn't seen in years. Marcus Chin, his old squad mate from Desert Storm. "Marcus?" Noah answered, leaning against an apple tree. "Been a while, brother." "Noah." Marcus's voice was tight, missing its usual warmth. "Listen carefully. I'm calling because I still have contacts in law enforcement. Sheriff's Department has been asking questions about your place, specifically about a young woman staying there." Noah's throat went dry. He glanced toward the caretaker's cottage where Ella was probably still sleeping. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that means they know something. My source says Sheriff Croft's been making calls to some heavy hitters in Atlanta, political types." Marcus paused. "Whatever you're mixed up in, you need to be careful. Croft's got a reputation for making problems disappear." Noah's free hand clenched into a fist. "Thanks for the heads up, Marcus. I owe you. Just watch your six. And Noah, delete this call from your phone." After hanging up, Noah stood motionless under the apple tree, mind racing. The festival had drawn hundreds of people. Anyone could have recognized Ella, despite her newly darkened hair and simple clothes. He heard the screen door of his house slam and looked up to see Caleb crossing the yard, still in his pajamas. "Dad, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Inside," Noah said quietly. "We need to talk." In the kitchen, Noah filled 2 cups with coffee, while Caleb sat at the worn wooden table. The morning sun streamed through the window, catching dust motes in its beam. Everything looked so normal, so peaceful. But Noah could feel it all starting to crumble. "Someone recognized her at the festival," Noah said, setting down Caleb's cup. "The sheriff's asking questions." Caleb's face drained of color. "We have to warn her." "I will. But first, I need you to understand something." Noah sat across from his son, his eyes grave. "What's coming? It's going to get ugly. These people Ella's running from, they're powerful. They've got money, influence, and now they know where she is." "We can't let them take her," Caleb said fiercely. "Son, I need you to listen. Your mother." Noah's voice caught. He took a breath and continued. "When your mother died, I promised myself I'd never put you in danger again. But keeping Ella here, that's exactly what I'm doing." "Mom would have helped her too," Caleb said quietly. "You know she would have." Noah closed his eyes briefly, remembering Sarah's unwavering moral compass. Yeah, she would have. They heard footsteps on the porch, and Ella appeared in the doorway, wearing one of Caleb's old flannels. Her smile faded when she saw their expressions. "What's wrong?" Noah gestured for her to sit. "Sheriff's Department is asking questions. Someone must have recognized you at the festival." Ella sank into a chair, her face pale but composed. "I should go. I never meant to put you both at risk." "No." Caleb started to protest, but Noah held up a hand. "Ella, I need you to tell me everything about Sheriff Croft, any connection to the people you're running from." She wrapped her arms around herself. "He's on their payroll, has been for years. He helps make sure their operations stay hidden, makes evidence disappear, intimidates witnesses." Her voice shook slightly. "He's not just corrupt, he's dangerous." Noah nodded slowly. He'd always sensed something off about Croft, even before Sarah's accident. The way the investigation had been handled, the missing witness statements, the charges that never stuck. A car engine rumbled in the distance. Noah moved to the window, peering through the curtains. A police cruiser rolled slowly past the orchard entrance. "Get away from the windows," he said quietly. "Both of you." They spent the day in tense vigilance. Noah sent Caleb to school despite his protests. Anything unusual might draw attention. He and Ella stayed inside, speaking in low voices, jumping at every sound from outside. As evening approached, Noah's truck bumped down the dirt road toward town for supplies. In his rearview mirror, he saw the police cruiser pull into the orchard entrance. Sheriff Croft sat behind the wheel, his face illuminated by the glow of his phone screen. Noah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The message was clear. "I know she's here. I'm watching." The cruiser's headlights gleamed in the growing dusk. a predator's eyes fixed on its prey. And somewhere in the darkening orchard, a girl who'd trusted them with her life was probably watching those same lights, knowing her sanctuary was no longer safe. Sheriff Croft remained in his vehicle, a knowing smile playing across his features as shadows lengthened across the orchard. The man wasn't just watching, he was savoring the fear he knew he was causing, like a cat playing with its mouse before the kill. The crunch of tires on gravel made Noah's head snap up. Through the morning mist, he spotted the white and green sheriff's cruiser crawling up his driveway. His stomach tightened as he recognized Sheriff Darrell Croft's broad-brimmed hat behind the wheel. Noah stood his ground by the barn, wiping his hands on his jeans. The cruiser came to a stop, and Sheriff Croft stepped out with that easy smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Morning, Noah," Croft called out, adjusting his gun belt as he walked over. "Quite a shindig you had here last night." "Whole town's talking about it." "Just a simple harvest festival," Noah replied, keeping his voice steady. "Like the one Sarah used to organize." "Mm-hmm." Croft glanced around the property, his keen eyes scanning every detail. "Heard you might have some help these days. New faces around the orchard?" Noah's heart picked up speed, but years of military training kept his expression neutral. "Just me and Caleb, same as always. Sometimes the neighbors lend a hand." "That right?" Croft pulled out a small notebook, flipping it open with deliberate slowness. "Because Mrs. Henderson at the general store swears she saw a young woman with you folks, dark hair, maybe 18 or 19? "Lot of young people helped with the festival," Noah deflected. "Don't know everyone's names." The sheriff's smile tightened. "Come now, Noah. We go back a ways, don't we? Even if things got complicated after Sarah's accident, I'd hate to think you're keeping secrets from law enforcement." Noah matched Croft's stare. "Nothing to keep secret, Darrell. My life's an open book." "Speaking of books," Croft tucked his notebook away. "You know about the governor's missing daughter? Big case. Got everyone worried. Girl just up and vanished from her protection detail." He paused, studying Noah's face. "Funny thing is, description matches what folks are saying about your mystery helper." "Haven't watched the news much lately," Noah said. "Been busy with the orchard." Croft nodded slowly, walking a few steps toward the caretaker's cottage. "That old place still standing? Thought it was falling apart last time I checked." Noah's fingers curled into fists. "Still needs work. Keep meaning to tear it down." "Mind if I take a look, for old time's sake?" "Actually, I do mind," Noah said firmly. "Private property, Darrell, unless you've got a warrant?" The sheriff's friendly mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold underneath. "No warrant, not yet." He turned back to Noah. "But if I find out you're harboring a fugitive, well, that would be mighty unfortunate, especially for Caleb. Boy's got a bright future ahead of him. Shame if trouble found its way to your door again." Noah felt his jaw tighten. "That a threat, Sheriff?" "Just looking out for an old neighbor." Croft tipped his hat. "You take care now, Noah, and if you happen to see anything unusual, you know where to find me." Noah watched the cruiser disappear down the drive, dust settling in its wake. He waited until he couldn't hear the engine anymore before rushing to the cottage. Ella was gone. He'd sent her and Caleb to the far end of the orchard at the first sign of the sheriff's car. The cottage looked undisturbed, but Noah knew better than to trust appearances. He did a quick sweep of the perimeter, checking for signs of surveillance equipment or tampering. His military training had never quite left him, and right now, he was grateful for it. An hour passed before Caleb's text came through. "Coast clear?" Noah replied with their old code word for safety, then sat heavily on the porch steps. The morning's peace was shattered. "Sheriff, Croft's visit wasn't a coincidence. Someone had talked. Someone had seen too much." When Caleb and Ella returned, Noah filled them in on the sheriff's visit. Ella's face went pale, but she didn't cry. Instead, she squared her shoulders, showing the same quiet strength that had first impressed Noah. "Maybe I should leave," she whispered. "I'm putting you both in danger." "No," Caleb said firmly, taking her hand. "We're in this together now." Noah nodded, though worry gnawed at his gut. "We'll figure something out. For now, we need to be more careful. No more trips to town. No more the sound of breaking glass cut through the air." They rushed to the cottage. The side window was shattered, and the interior looked like a tornado had torn through it. Drawers hung open, clothes were strewn across the floor, and the few possessions Ella had collected were scattered everywhere. In the middle of the mess, pinned to the wall with a hunting knife, was a note. 3 words in block letters. "We know." Ella's hands trembled as she reached for the paper, but Noah stopped her. "Don't touch it. Might be fingerprints." "Fingerprints won't help," she said bitterly. "These people, They're too powerful. They don't leave traces. Caleb began picking up the scattered clothes, his movements angry. We can't just let them threaten us like this. Noah studied the room, his military training kicking in again. The break-in was meant to scare them, to show they could get close. But why leave a warning instead of simply grabbing Ella? Unless they're playing with us, he realized aloud, testing to see what we'll do. Ella sank onto the bed, clutching one of her few photographs, now crumpled but intact. They always liked their games. That's what made them so dangerous back in Atlanta. They never just struck, they toyed with their victims first. Noah burst through the cottage door, his weathered face tight with worry. Ella sat at the small kitchen table, sketching in her notebook. The afternoon sun filtered through lace curtains, casting dappled shadows across her face. You need to leave, now. His voice was firm but gentle. Sheriff Croft was just here asking questions. It's not safe anymore. Ella's pencil stilled mid-stroke. She looked up, her eyes clear and steady. No, this isn't up for discussion. Noah ran a hand through his gray-streaked hair. They ransacked the cottage while we were out. Left a note. They know you're here. I heard you and Caleb talking about it. Ella closed her sketchbook carefully. But I'm not running anymore. Ella, these people. Noah's voice cracked with frustration. They're dangerous. You said it yourself. They'll kill to keep their secrets. And they'll keep killing if nobody stops them. She stood up, her shoulders squared. I'm done running. If I disappear again, I lose everything. So do you. Noah paced the small room, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. I promised to protect you. And you have. Ella's voice softened. But protection isn't just about hiding. Sometimes it's about standing up. The door creaked open, and Caleb stepped in, his face serious beyond his 17 years. She's right, Dad. We can't just send her away and pretend none of this happened. Son, you don't understand what we're dealing with. I understand plenty. Caleb moved to stand beside Ella. We've got proof of corruption going all the way up to the governor's office, evidence of trafficking. And now the local sheriff's involved too. Ella pulled out a thick envelope from her drawer. I didn't just run with empty hands. I have documents, photos, recordings, everything that made them want to silence me in the first place. Noah sank into a chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on his broad shoulders. Even with evidence, who would believe us? A poor orchard owner, his teenage son, and a girl they've been hiding? The truth has power, Ella said quietly. My mother, the governor, she tried to protect me by hiding me away, but that just gave them more control, more time to cover their tracks. Caleb pulled out his phone. Remember my friend Jenny? Her aunt works at the Chronicle. She's been looking for a story like this for years. Noah looked between them, seeing not just determination, but a deep, unshakable certainty in their eyes. The same look he'd seen in his wife's eyes years ago, when she'd refused to let cancer define her final days. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it smart. We do it right. Ella nodded, her hand steady as she spread the documents across the table. Photos of meetings in shadowy parking lots, bank statements showing suspicious transfers, names, dates, connections, all carefully documented. I spent months gathering this, she explained, before they caught me, before Mom tried to hide me away for my own protection. But they had people everywhere, even in the safe house. Noah studied the evidence, his military, training kicking in. We need multiple copies, secured in different locations. Already done, Caleb said. I helped her scan everything last week. It's all encrypted and stored on secure servers. And we need a plan. Noah's voice grew stronger, more focused. A way to get this public that they can't stop or suppress. Ella's eyes lit up. The Harvest Festival brought reporters from 3 counties. They're already interested in the orchard's revival story. What if we gave them something bigger? The afternoon light was fading now, casting long shadows through the cottage windows. Outside, the apple trees stood like silent guardians, their branches swaying gently in the autumn breeze. Noah looked at his son, seeing the man he was becoming. He looked at Ella, no longer the frightened girl he'd found behind his barn, but a woman ready to face her fears. And he looked at the evidence spread before them, proof of corruption that had torn families apart and destroyed lives. The truth, he said finally, needs to come out, all of it. Ella reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Together. Caleb nodded firmly. Together. The 3 of them gathered around the table, surrounded by the evidence of crimes too long hidden. Outside, the sun dipped lower, painting the orchard in shades of gold and crimson. The time for running was over. The time for truth had come. All right, Noah said, pulling a fresh sheet of paper forward. Let's make a plan." Noah's fingers trembled as he dialed the number he hadn't called in years. The phone rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. "Patty McLean speaking." "Patty, it's Noah Riggins." There was a pause on the line. "Well, I'll be damned. Haven't heard from you since that dust-up in Kandahar. What's got you calling after all this time?" Noah took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the orchard through his kitchen window. Ella and Caleb were sitting on the porch steps, talking in low voices. "I need your help, Patty. Remember how you always said you wanted to break a story that would shake this town to its core? I'm listening." The playfulness in her voice shifted to a sharp focus. "Can you come out to the orchard? Today? And bring your camera crew." "Noah Riggins asking for cameras?" Patty chuckled. "Now I know something's wrong. Give me one good reason why I should drop everything and drive out there." Noah watched as Ella brushed her dark hair from her face, the gesture so reminiscent of the missing person photos he'd seen. "Because I've got the governor's daughter sitting on my front porch." The line went silent. "Then I'll be there in 30 minutes. True to her word, Patty's news van kicked up dust on the orchard's dirt road exactly half an hour later. She stepped out, a stocky woman with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. 2 camera operators followed her, carrying equipment. "Where is she?" Patty asked without preamble. Noah led them to the house. Inside, Ella sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She looked up as they entered, her eyes clear and determined despite the slight tremor in her fingers. "Miss Whitmore," Patty said softly, taking in the young woman's appearance. "I've been covering your disappearance for months." "I know," Ella replied. "I've seen your reports. You're the only one who questioned the official story." Patty pulled up a chair, her face softening. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, Ella spoke. She told them about discovering financial records that didn't add up, about overhearing conversations about shipments that weren't goods but people. She described how her mother had tried to protect her by sending her away, only to have her security detail turn against her. "We need to go live," Patty said when Ella finished. "Tonight, before they can stop us." A recorded statement could be buried, but a live broadcast? That's harder to silence. Noah's hand tightened on his coffee mug. "Is it safe?" "Safer than hiding," Patty replied. "The truth is her best protection now." The camera crew began setting up in the orchard, choosing a spot where the apple trees formed a natural backdrop. As the sun began to set, they positioned lights and tested equipment. Noah paced nearby, his military training making him hyper-aware of every shadow, every sound. Ella sat on a wooden crate, scribbling in her notebook, preparing what she would say. Caleb hadn't left her side all afternoon, bringing her water, offering quiet words of encouragement. 5 minutes, Patty called out, checking her phone. "The station's standing by. We'll cut into regular programming." Ella stood, smoothing down her simple blue dress. Her hands were shaking again, but her voice was steady as she reviewed her notes one last time. "I have to do this right. People need to understand why I ran, why I stayed silent for so long." Caleb took her hands in his, and she looked up at him. The setting sun painted everything in gold, making his brown eyes glow with warmth. "You're the bravest person I've ever met," he said softly. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared." He reached up, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It means doing what's right anyway." Ella's breath caught as Caleb leaned forward. His lips met hers in a gentle kiss, sweet and brief, but full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with conviction. "No matter what happens," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I believe you." A tear slid down Ella's cheek, but she was smiling. She squeezed his hands once before turning toward the cameras, where Patty was motioning that it was time to begin. Noah stood to the side, watching his son and the girl who had become like a daughter to him. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 30 seconds, Patty called out, and Ella took her position in front of the camera. The evening breeze rustled through the apple trees, carrying the sweet scent of ripening fruit. In moments, she would tell her story to the world. The autumn sunrise painted the orchard in gentle strokes of pink and gold. Dew sparkled on fallen leaves as Patty McLean's news van rumbled up the dirt path to Noah's house. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, and her weathered face carried the determined look Noah remembered from their army days. "Got your message," she said, hopping out of the van. "Live broadcast exposing government corruption? Just like old times, soldier?" Despite her light tone, her eyes were sharp and serious. Noah helped her unload equipment from the van. "Thanks for coming, Patty. I know it's asking a lot." Please, she scoffed, hauling out cables. I've been waiting 20 years for a story this big. Besides, I still owe you for Fallujah. They set up under the largest apple tree, its branches creating a natural canopy. Patty worked efficiently, setting up lights and checking camera angles while muttering about signal strength. The morning air was crisp and still, broken only by the sound of equipment being assembled and tested. Inside the house, Ella sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cooling mug of tea. She'd barely touched it. Her face was pale but determined as she reviewed her handwritten notes one last time. You don't have to do this, Caleb said softly, sitting beside her. Ella looked up, managing a small smile. Yes, I do. These people, they've taken so much from so many families. They almost destroyed mine. Someone has to stop them. The sound of car tires on gravel made them all tense, but it was just Patty's assistant arriving with the satellite uplink equipment. Time was growing short. Testing, 1 to 2, Patty's voice crackled through a headset. We're live in 30 minutes, people. Let's make it count. Noah watched as Ella walked outside, her steps steady despite everything. She wore a simple blue dress, nothing like the designer clothes from her old life. Her dark hair was pulled back, showing the quiet strength in her face. She looked more like herself than she ever had in those polished campaign photos. Mic check, Patty said, clipping a small microphone to Ella's collar. Just speak naturally, honey. Tell your story like you're talking to a friend. Ella nodded, taking her place in front of the camera. Caleb squeezed her hand once before stepping back. The morning light caught the silver cross at her throat, a gift from Noah's late wife that he'd given her last week. 5 minutes, Patty announced, checking her watch. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Local feed is confirmed, her assistant called out. State networks are picking us up. We're going wide. Patty raised her hand, counting down silently. 4 fingers. 3, 2, 1. The red light blinked on. My name is Ella Whitmore, she began, her voice clear and steady. 3 months ago, I disappeared from public view. Many of you know me as the governor's daughter. Today, I'm here to tell you why I ran and what I discovered that certain powerful people wanted to keep hidden. She spoke without wavering, laying out the evidence she'd gathered. Names of campaign donors who used their shipping companies as fronts for human trafficking. Dates of meetings where bribes changed hands. The moment she realized her mother's campaign manager was involved. When I brought this evidence to people I trusted, they betrayed that trust, she continued. I was sent away for my own protection, but it wasn't protection, it was prison. They were going to keep me silent, one way or another. The camera stayed steady on her face as she described her escape, careful not to mention Noah or Caleb by name. She spoke about finding sanctuary, about rediscovering her faith in human kindness. To the families whose loved ones were taken by these monsters, I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. To my mother, who tried to protect me the only way she knew how, I forgive you. But this ends today. Ella pulled out a USB drive. This contains all the evidence I gathered, including financial records, emails, and surveillance footage. It's already been uploaded to secure servers and will be released to every major news outlet in the country. Her voice grew stronger. To those who thought they could silence me, you failed. To those who helped me survive and find my voice again, thank you. The truth matters. Justice matters. And no one is above the law. Patty signaled silently. 1 minute left. I'm not afraid anymore, Ella said, looking directly into the camera. I'm standing here in the light, speaking truth to power, and I'm not alone. The red light blinked off. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Patty whooped, pulling off her headset. Girl, that was perfect. They're going to be talking about this for... She stopped as a new sound cut through the morning quiet. Sirens, growing louder by the second. But Ella didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, a real full smile that lit up her whole face. Those aren't for me, she said softly. Listen. The sirens were heading away from the orchard, toward town, toward the offices and homes of the people she'd just exposed. The morning sun climbed higher over the orchard as Ella finished her testimony. Her voice, though shaky at first, had grown stronger with each revelation. The cameras were still rolling, broadcasting her story across Georgia. Noah stood beside her, a protective hand on her shoulder, while Caleb held her trembling fingers. Suddenly, the crunch of tires on gravel cut through the tense silence. A black SUV with tinted windows sped up the dirt road, followed by 2 police escorts. Ella's breath caught in her throat. Noah instinctively stepped closer to her, but she squeezed his arm gently. It's okay, she whispered. I know that car. The SUV barely came to a stop before the back door flew open. Governor Margaret Whitmore emerged, her usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. Her heels sank into the soft earth as she rushed forward, tears already streaming down her face. "Ella!" she cried out, her voice cracking with emotion. "Oh God, Ella!" Mother and daughter collided in a fierce embrace. The governor's shoulders shook with sobs as she held her child for the first time in months. "I'm so sorry," she whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry." Patty gestured to her cameraman, who moved closer to capture the reunion. The governor didn't seem to care about the cameras anymore. Her carefully maintained public image crumbled as she cupped Ella's face in her hands. "I thought I was protecting you," Margaret said, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "I was such a fool. I trusted the wrong people, and I nearly lost you forever." Ella's own tears fell freely now. "Mom, I needed you to believe me, not hide me away." "I know, baby. I know that now." The governor turned to face the cameras, directly, keeping one arm around her daughter. Her voice shifted into the commanding tone that had won her elections, but now it carried raw honesty instead of political polish. "To all the people of Georgia," she began, "I stand before you not as your governor, but as a mother who failed her child. My daughter discovered a criminal enterprise operating within our state, connected to my own campaign donors and officials. Instead of confronting this evil head-on, I tried to protect her by sending her away. That decision allowed corruption to flourish and put my daughter's life at risk." She squared her shoulders, tears still glistening on her cheeks. "As of this moment, I am ordering a full investigation into every allegation Ella has made. I am establishing an independent commission to root out corruption at every level, and I am personally calling for the immediate arrest of all individuals named in my daughter's testimony." As if on cue, several black FBI vehicles rolled into the orchard. Agents in tactical gear poured out, their jackets emblazoned with bold yellow letters. Noah watched as they spread out, taking up strategic positions. Through the commotion, a police cruiser appeared on the road. Sheriff Croft stepped out, adjusting his badge with his usual smug confidence. He started walking toward the gathering, apparently unaware of what awaited him. "Governor," he called out, tipping his hat. "I came as soon as I heard the broadcast. I'm here to help sort out this unfortunate situation." "The only situation being sorted out is yours, Daryl," Margaret replied coldly. The FBI agents moved with practiced efficiency. Before Croft could react, they surrounded him. The sheriff's hand twitched toward his weapon, but he thought better of it as multiple weapons trained on him. "Sheriff Daryl Croft," an agent announced clearly, "you are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and aiding in human trafficking operations." The agent began reciting his rights as another agent pulled Croft's hands behind his back. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed across the orchard. The cameras captured every moment as the sheriff's badge was removed and he was led away. His face, usually so controlled, twisted with rage and disbelief. "You can't do this to me," he shouted. "Do you know who I work for?" "We know exactly who you work for," the lead agent replied, "and we're arresting them too." Noah watched the scene unfold, still keeping a protective stance near Ella. He caught Governor Whitmore looking at him with grateful eyes. "Mr. Riggins," she said softly, "you protected my daughter when I couldn't. You gave her shelter when the world turned dangerous. I don't know how to thank you." "She protected us too," Noah replied simply, glancing at Caleb. "She brought life back to this place." As federal agents led Sheriff Croft to their vehicle, Ella stood tall between her mother and the Riggins men, her old family and her new one finally, united in the morning sun. Golden sunlight filtered through the apple trees, casting dappled shadows across the orchard's well-worn paths. The buzz of media frenzy had finally died down, replaced by the gentle hum of everyday life returning to the Riggins farm. The last news van had pulled away days ago, leaving only tire tracks that were slowly being erased by time and weather. Noah stood at his kitchen window, coffee mug warming his weathered hands. The morning paper lay on the counter, its headlines no longer screaming about scandal and corruption. Instead, a small article on page 3 detailed Governor Whitmore's sweeping reforms and the ongoing investigations into the trafficking ring. Justice was working its slow but steady course. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Mrs. Chin from down the road stood there, holding a still warm apple pie. "Made it with some of your own apples," she said with a warm smile. "The ones my Tommy picked last weekend. Never seen him. So excited about helping with groceries before. Noah accepted the pie with a grateful nod. It was the third one this week, the community's way of saying thank you, of acknowledging their previous coldness and making amends. The isolation that had wrapped around the orchard for so long was finally thawing. In the distance, he could see Caleb checking the irrigation lines. His son moved with new purpose these days, his shoulders straighter, his smile easier. The whispers and sideways glances that had followed him through school had transformed into respectful nods and genuine friendship. Being part of something bigger than themselves had changed everything. The screen door creaked, and Ella stepped onto the porch. She looked different now, still cautious, but no longer haunted. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, work gloves tucked into the pocket of her jeans. She'd traded designer clothes for practical farm wear, and the change suited her. "Morning," she said, reaching for her own mug of coffee. "The Hendersons called. They want to know if we can spare any more Honeycrisps for their restaurant." Noah smiled. The orchard's business had tripled since everything happened. "Tell them we'll set aside 2 bushels. Ella made a note on her phone. Another change. She no longer hid from technology or connection. Her mother called regularly now, their relationship healing, one conversation at a time. The governor had even visited last weekend, rolling up her sleeves to help with the harvest. A truck rumbled up the drive, and old Bill Peterson stepped out. He'd been the first to extend an olive branch after everything came to light, admitting he'd been wrong about Noah all these years. Now he was a regular visitor, bringing farming advice and friendly conversation. "Brought you folks some of Martha's preserves," Bill called out, holding up a box of mason jars. "She says they'll go nice with all them pies people keep bringing." Noah invited him onto the porch, and they settled into the familiar rhythm of neighborly chat. They discussed rainfall patterns, crop yields, and the upcoming town council meeting where Noah had been invited to speak about sustainable farming practices. As they talked, more visitors trickled in. The Martinez family arrived to pick apples, their children's laughter echoing through the trees. Sarah from the local paper stopped by for a follow-up story about the orchard's revival. Even Pastor Roberts made an appearance, discussing plans for the church's harvest festival. Through it all, Noah watched Ella move easily among the visitors. She knew everyone's names now, asked about their families, shared recipes and gardening tips. The fear that had first brought her to their door had been replaced by something stronger: belonging. Caleb finished with the irrigation and made his way back to the house. He paused to help the Martinez kids reach a high branch, teaching them the gentle twist and pull motion that wouldn't damage the fruit. His natural kindness, once overlooked by many, now drew people in. As the afternoon light began to soften, the visitors gradually departed. Bill was the last to leave, clapping Noah on the shoulder with genuine warmth. "You've done good here, Riggins." "Real good." Noah watched his truck disappear down the drive, remembering all the years of isolation, of being the outsider. Now the orchard hummed with life and connection, healing more than just the 3 people who called it home. Ella emerged from the kitchen, having finished storing the day's gifts. "I'm going to walk the north row," she said. "Check on those new saplings we planted." "I'll come with you," Caleb offered, appearing at her side. The way they looked at each other, soft and sure, made Noah's heart ache, in a good way. He settled into his porch chair, feeling the solid wood beneath him, the years of memories carved into its arms. The evening air carried the sweet scent of ripening apples and freshly turned earth. In the distance, Caleb and Ella walked between the rows of trees, their hands finding each other naturally, their steps falling into an easy rhythm. Noah watched them disappear into the orchard, their figures silhouetted against the golden light. Ella's head rested briefly on Caleb's shoulder as they walked, and their quiet laughter drifted back to the porch. These moments, simple, precious, and free, were worth everything they'd gone through to get here. The old orchard had become more than just a farm. It was a sanctuary, a place of second chances and new beginnings. Noah sat quietly, letting the peace of the moment wash over him, watching his son and the young woman who'd become like a daughter walk hand in hand through the trees they'd all helped bring back to life. The fluorescent lights of the county clerk's office buzzed overhead as Ella sat at the worn wooden desk, carefully filling out the legal name change paperwork. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote, the weight of the moment making even this simple task feel momentous. Caleb leaned against the desk beside her, trying to lighten the mood. "I guess you're stuck with us now," he said with a gentle smile. "No, taking it back once you're officially a Riggins." Ella looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I wouldn't want to take it back," she whispered. The forms in front of her represented more than just a legal document. They were a declaration of belonging. Noah stood a few steps back, hands in his pockets, watching his son and the young woman who had changed their lives. The clerk's office was quiet this morning, just a few other people going about their business, the shuffle of papers and soft murmur of voices creating a peaceful backdrop. Ella Grace Whitmore, she read aloud as she filled in her current legal name. Then, with careful strokes, she wrote her chosen new name, Ella Grace Riggins Whitmore. Has a nice ring to it, Noah said softly, moving closer to rest a weathered hand on her shoulder. The clerk, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Peterson, smiled as she watched them. She'd known Noah for years, had seen him withdraw from the community after his wife's death. The change in him now was remarkable. Just need your signature here and here, Mrs. Peterson pointed to the marked lines, and then we'll have your witnesses sign. Ella's hand was steady now as she signed. Noah and Caleb stepped forward to add their signatures as witnesses, making it official. Mrs. Peterson stamped the documents with a satisfying thunk. Congratulations, she said warmly. The court will process these within 30 days, and you'll receive your official documentation in the mail. Outside the county building, the spring air was sweet with the scent of blooming flowers. Ella hugged her folder of papers close to her chest as they walked to Noah's truck. You know, Caleb said, opening the passenger door for her, Mom would have loved this. She always wanted a daughter. Noah's eyes crinkled at the corners, a mix of sadness and joy in his expression. Sarah had a way of seeing the good in people, just like you do, Ella. She would have known right away that you belonged here. The drive back to the orchard was peaceful, the truck's tires crunching on the familiar gravel road. The trees were beginning to bud, tiny promises of fruit to come. They passed the spot where Noah had first found Ella that stormy night, scared and alone behind the barn. I have something special planned, Noah announced as they parked. He disappeared into the barn and returned carrying a young apple sapling, its roots carefully wrapped in burlap. Is that? Ella's voice trailed off as she recognized the variety. A Honeycrisp, Sarah's favorite. Thought we could plant it together, Noah said. In Sarah's memory, new beginnings and all that. They chose a spot near the cottage where Ella had first stayed, where the morning sun would warm the young tree's branches. Caleb grabbed shovels from the barn while Ella filled watering cans. Together, they dug the hole, making it wide and deep enough for the sapling's roots to spread. Noah showed them how to mix in rich compost, explaining how Sarah had taught him everything he knew about caring for trees. She used to say, every apple tree tells a story. Noah remembered, carefully lowering the sapling into place. Some are about tradition, some about change, but they're all about hope. Ella scooped handfuls of soil, gently filling in around the roots. Caleb worked beside her, their hands occasionally brushing, sharing small smiles. Noah watched them work, seeing echoes of his past and glimpses of the future in their movements. The three of them patted down the earth around the young tree, making sure it stood straight and strong. Ella poured the first watering can, the water seeping into the dark soil like a blessing. To Sarah, she said softly, stepping back to admire their work. Thank you for the family you created. To Mom, Caleb echoed, slipping his hand into Ella's. Noah touched the sapling's slender trunk, his callous fingers gentle against the smooth bark. In the fading evening light, the young tree cast a delicate shadow across the orchard soil, a new story taking root in familiar ground. Snow drifted lazily from a pearl gray sky, dusting the bare apple trees with a crystalline shimmer that made the entire orchard look like something from a fairy tale. Noah stood in the crisp morning air, his breath forming small, persistent clouds as he carefully mounted the new wooden sign above the orchard's entrance. His movements were deliberate and reverent, treating this moment with the ceremony it deserved. The fresh paint gleamed despite the weak winter sunlight filtering through the overcast sky. Riggins and Daughter Orchards written in warm burgundy letters that seemed to glow against the weathered cedar backing. His weathered hands, scarred from years of honest work and sacrifice, traced the ampersand with gentle reverence. He remembered how Ella had insisted on painting that particular symbol herself, adding delicate flourishes that made it look like intertwined apple branches reaching toward each other. Her artistic touch had transformed a simple punctuation mark into something beautiful and meaningful. The sign represented more than just a business change or legal formality. It was a declaration of family, of belonging, of the kind of healing that comes when broken souls find their way home to each other. The winter wind carried the scent of snow and dormant earth, clean and pure. Noah adjusted the sign one final time, making sure it hung perfectly straight. This moment mattered. After everything they'd been through together, the fear, the danger, the gradual building of trust, This simple wooden sign marked their official transformation from strangers who'd found each other in a storm to a real family choosing to build a future together. Inside the warm farmhouse kitchen, golden light spilled through frost-edge windows as Ella stood watching Noah work. She wrapped her hands around a steaming mug of apple cider, the ceramic warming her palms as steam rose in delicate spirals. The cider was made from the same recipe Noah's wife had perfected years ago, a tradition Ella now carried forward with loving care. The familiar scent of cinnamon and cloves filled the air, mixing with the wood smoke drifting in from the fireplace and creating an atmosphere of complete comfort and safety. Her reflection in the window showed a face that had changed dramatically over the months. Gone was the haunted, fearful expression that had defined her for so long. In its place was a serenity that seemed to glow from within, the kind of peace that comes from finally finding where you belong. She wore a soft wool sweater in deep green, one that Noah had quietly bought for her when he noticed her old clothes were wearing thin. Small acts of care like that had slowly built the foundation of trust between them. "He's been out there for an hour getting that sign just right," Caleb said, coming up behind her with his own mug of cider. The familiar warmth of his presence made her smile even before she turned. He rested his chin on top of her head, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the past months. His arms came around her waist, holding her close as they both watched his father through the window. Dad's always been particular about his handiwork, but this is different. This matters to him in a way that goes deeper than just doing a job well. "It has to be perfect," Ella murmured, leaning back into Caleb's embrace. The solid warmth of him against her back was a comfort she'd never expected to find again. "It's not every day you officially become part of an orchard's legacy. This place has been in your family for generations. And now," she paused, still sometimes amazed by the reality of it, "now I'm really part of it too." The kitchen counter was covered with neat rows of paper bags filled with their winter offerings. Jars of apple butter that gleamed like amber jewels, carefully dried fruit arranged in decorative packages, and preserves in every flavor imaginable. Ella had learned to make each one under Noah's patient guidance, his gentle corrections and encouraging words, turning what could have been intimidating into something joyful. Each jar bore their new label, a simple but elegant design that featured 3 apple trees growing close together, their branches intertwined in a symbol of unity and strength. The morning light caught the labels just right, making them seem to shimmer with promise. These weren't just products to sell, they were tangible proof of their new life together, created with hands that had learned to trust and hearts that had learned to hope again. Noah finally came inside, stamping snow from his worn work boots on the thick mat by the door. His cheeks were red from the cold, and tiny flakes of snow still clung to his gray hair, but his eyes held a warmth and contentment that had become more common these days. The hard lines around his eyes had softened, replaced by the kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done something truly worthwhile. "Well, it's official now," he announced with quiet pride, accepting the mug of steaming cider Ella handed him with both hands. "Though I suppose it's been official since you changed your name at the courthouse last month." "The paperwork just made it real on paper," Ella said, helping him remove his heavy winter coat and hanging it carefully on the wooden peg by the door. Her movements were gentle and caring, the simple domestic gesture carrying the weight of all the family rituals she'd never experienced growing up in political spotlight. "This makes it real to everyone else who drives by. It tells the world who we are now." They moved together to the living room, where a fire crackled invitingly in the stone hearth. The flames danced and leaped, casting warm golden light across the comfortable, lived-in furniture. The mantel above held a carefully arranged collection of photographs, new ones alongside the cherished old ones of Noah's late wife. Pictures of Ella and Caleb laughing together at the fall festival, all 3 of them standing proudly after the first heavy snow, candid moments captured during their daily life that marked their transformation from strangers thrown together by circumstance to a family choosing each other every single day. "Remember when you first found me?" Ella asked, settling onto the worn but comfortable couch, pulling a soft afghan over her legs. Her voice carried wonder rather than pain now when she spoke of that night. "I was so scared, so certain I'd never feel safe again. I couldn't even imagine trusting another person, let alone finding a real home." Noah nodded slowly, easing into his favorite armchair with a soft grunt of satisfaction. The chair had molded to his shape over the years, a perfect fit that spoke of countless evenings spent in quiet contemplation. "You were like a wounded bird, ready to fly away at the slightest movement, trembling in the rain, looking like you expected the world to hurt you again. But something told me you needed more than just shelter from the storm. You both needed each other, Caleb added, moving to stoke the fire with the poker, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. The flames grew brighter, casting dancing shadows on the walls covered with Ella's paintings. Landscapes of the orchard through the seasons, portraits of Noah and Caleb working among the trees, scenes of ordinary life made beautiful through her artist's eye. We all did, really. The orchard was just existing before you came, Ella, going through the motions. Now it's living again, growing into something bigger than any of us imagined. The flames cast their dancing shadows as they sat in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the journey that had brought them here. Through the frost-edged window, they could see their new sign swaying gently in the winter breeze, the burgundy letters standing out boldly against the gray sky. The snow was falling harder now, creating a curtain of white that made their warm house feel like a sanctuary separate from the rest of the world. But inside, warmth surrounded them like a protective embrace. Not just the heat from the fire, but the deeper warmth that comes from being truly known and loved. "I've been thinking," Noah said after a while, his voice thoughtful and planning, the tone he used when he was considering the future with careful hope. "Come spring, we should plant that new variety you've been researching, Caleb. The one that's more disease-resistant and might give us a better harvest even in difficult weather. And Ella, your idea about offering painting classes in the barn during the off-season, we should definitely do that too. Turn the empty months into something productive and beautiful." Ella's eyes lit up with excitement, the kind of pure joy that still surprised her sometimes. "Really? You mean it? You think people would actually come?" "This place isn't just about growing apples anymore," Noah replied with conviction, gesturing toward the window where their orchard stretched out beneath its blanket of snow. "It's about growing something bigger than ourselves. Community, connection, family, hope." He paused, looking at each of them in turn. "It's about showing people that broken things can be made whole again, that strangers can become family, that there's always room for one more at the table." The word family hung in the air like a blessing, settling around them with the weight of truth finally spoken aloud. Ella moved to sit closer to the fire, drawing her knees up to her chest and wrapping her arms around them. The flames highlighted the peace in her face, a peace that had been hard-won through months of patient healing, of learning to trust again, one small step at a time, of building a new life from the ashes of everything she'd lost. The scars were still there, probably always would be, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they were proof of her strength, evidence of battles fought and won, of a spirit that refused to be broken no matter what the world threw at it. Noah watched her, his heart full as he remembered that terrified girl who'd appeared behind his barn during the thunderstorm. The transformation wasn't just in her, it was in all of them, like ripples spreading out from a stone dropped in still water. His son smiled more now, laughed more freely, had plans and dreams that stretched far into the future. The townspeople stopped by regularly, not just for produce but for conversation and company, drawn by the sense of healing and hope that seemed to emanate from their little orchard. The place had become a gathering point, again, just as it had been when his wife was alive, when her laughter had filled these same rooms. Ella turned to him suddenly, her eyes glistening in the firelight with unshed tears of gratitude. "You didn't just protect me," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved me. You gave me back my life, my ability to trust, my hope for the future. You showed me what a real family looks like." Noah stood slowly, reaching for the soft blanket draped over the back of his chair. It was one his wife had knitted years ago, soft blue wool worked with careful stitches and endless love. He unfolded it gently and placed it around Ella's shoulders, tucking it around her with the same tender care he'd once shown his own children. "You gave us all something to live for again," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "You brought light back into this house, laughter back into our days. You made us remember what it feels like to be a real family again." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing their world in pristine white. But inside their warm kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life and the promise of their shared future, three hearts beat in rhythm with the quiet truth that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that choose each other against all odds. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Noah Riggins, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.